What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It's Saturday night, and as I always like to say, Saturday night's all right for fighting. And this was a Saturday afternoon fight. Um, this was a unprecedented UFC card, UFC 254. Given that it is the last fight card, at least for the time being, at Fight Island, the UFC will be moving on to Vegas, put more events on in Vegas. Hopefully, they don't have too many issues with doing so here throughout the rest of the 2020 year, heading into 2021. But this is the UFC 254 post-fight reaction show, presented to you by yours truly, Ryan Thomas, here on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I wanted to bring this to you guys a little bit earlier. As you can tell, my voice is a little tired. I've been at it all day today, working hard, doing a lot of different things today, getting a lot of things taken care of today in the process of this UFC afternoon pay-per-view. I liked it. I don't know how you guys felt, but knowing that the main card typically starts on your average UFC pay-per-view night at 10 o'clock. This main card started at 2 o'clock, being that it was in Abu Dhabi, was in Fight Island, and we did witness history today, this afternoon, as Khabib, the Eagle, Nurmagomedov, moved his career wins total to 29 wins and 0 losses, and after the fact, decided to have some of his cornermen take off his gloves, leaving those UFC gloves in the octagon, which is such a staple moment for fighters that are calling it a career. And Khabib did that today. He decided that after 29 straight victories, 29 straight dominant victories, that he would ride off into the sunset. He would retire and move on with his life, move on to the next chapter of his life. I'm going to dive into that and discuss it, really pick that apart. But first, I want to just dive into the fight and discuss the fight itself. Khabib defeats Justin Gaethje in the second round. This was about 6.5 minutes of a fight. That the first round, I got to tell you, I've never seen a Khabib fight at that pace, in that former fashion, where Khabib comes right out, guns blazing, on the feet, trying to really, I think, prove a point in this one, to make this one an entertaining bout. We knew that it would be entertaining. We knew that both fighters have the skill sets to combat one another, pun intended, and to somewhat say, prior to this fight taking place, that Justin Gaethje was the toughest test for Khabib. A lot of people disagree with me on that. It wasn't a statement that I made. It was a statement that the UFC made in terms of how this fight is billed and how this fight is pushed by the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They pushed this one as if Justin Gaethje was the toughest test for Khabib. And I think we saw a little bit of that today. Not too much of it, obviously, being that Khabib did win in the second round. But we did see Justin Gaethje fire off plenty of hard shots, plenty of hard kicks. But unlike the Tony Ferguson fight, where Justin Gaethje found great success firing off combos, Khabib pressured Justin Gaethje early and often, so much so that Gaethje was unable to really fire off combinations. And that was a brilliant game plan by Khabib and by Khabib's cornerman to pressure Justin Gaethje. Don't give him much space, whether you're not giving him space to eventually shoot for a takedown or whether you are in the stand-up battle. Don't give Gaethje too much space. Force Gaethje to be on the back foot, put Gaethje's back to the cage, and then initiate the clinch and then initiate the takedowns. And I think Justin Gaethje had a game plan. That game plan was to avoid the takedown and avoid getting your back to the cage. But what we saw in the first round was a high-pressure, a high-paced performance from Khabib, forcing Gaethje to have his back to the fence, forcing Gaethje to really frantically move. And when you saw the corner of Justin Gaethje saying, slow down, Trevor Whitman saying, slow down, you then say to yourself, oh, Justin Gaethje's fighting at a ferocious pace, a pace that he doesn't need to fight at this early in the fight. Had that fight gone, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, I do think that Gaethje would have badly gassed. We would have seen a deteriorating version of Justin Gaethje throughout this fight, a version of Justin Gaethje that was a far cry from the Justin Gaethje that we've seen in his previous fights. And albeit in a microcosm of a 6-minute fight, 6.5-minute fight, we saw a Khabib Nurmagomedov that was arguably better than ever. For a guy that is 29-0, for a guy that has cemented himself as one of the best in the history of this sport over the last 3-4 years, this was probably Khabib Nurmagomedov's most impressive performance. And dare I say, in terms of a title challenger, this was probably Justin Gaethje's worst fight. I mean, for this one to, not many have had success at the office, going to the office against, sitting across from Khabib. Not many have had success, obviously. No one has had success. But even in fights that Khabib has won, there are very few moments for the fighters that have lost to Khabib for them to even have success. I mean, Khabib has probably only lost maybe one round on the judges' scorecards. And off the top of my head, that was that third round to Conor, which was largely looked at as a round that Khabib took off. So the fact is that when I look at this fight, when I always look at this fight, I say to myself, going in, I thought Justin Gaethje would provide some difficult moments for Khabib in that he tries to create the car crashes, tries to be as violent as possible. Justin Gaethje tried to create as many car crashes, as many collisions as he possibly could. And for the fact that he tried to create those car crashes, tried to create those collisions, and yet Khabib was able to initiate the takedown, initiate the game plan, and this transition that led to the arm triangle that finished the fight, that put Justin Gaethje to sleep, that moment where that transition was had, where that transition was seen, really showed me that Khabib is truly one of the elite fighters that this sport has ever seen. It is cemented in stone that whether Khabib decided to retire today or not, he is one of the best to ever do it. And for Justin Gaethje, he goes back to the drawing board. He will get another opportunity against somebody within the top 5 of the UFC lightweight division, whether that is, the winner of Conor and Poirier. I'll dive into that. I'll dive into the whole rigmarole of the 155-pound UFC lightweight division. But for me, this performance, this fight is more about something that I think is it's extremely sentimental, extremely important. The lesson for me in this fight, and I'm not going to lie to you, there are rare moments in sports where I get a little choked up. I can't really come up with many moments where I get a little bit choked up. And the fact that I'm getting choked up right now, even talking about it, it just goes to show you that this guy is a rarity in this sport, and it has nothing to do with what he was able to do. Man, freaking tearing up. It has nothing to do with what he was able to do inside the octagon, but it has everything to do with what he was fighting for outside of the octagon. The fact that Khabib fought this fight with a true tragedy weighing on him as motivation for this fight. We have all been there. Whether we're fighters, whether we're just trying to get through the next day, coming off of the aftermath of a loss in our lives. That was a truly inspiring performance. And if there's anything that I can take away from it in terms of my memory bank of UFC performances, this was probably one of the most powerful, impactful, transcendent performances that I have ever seen from an athlete in professional sports. And, I'm racking my brain. What performances have I seen that really show the human side of an athlete? And someone brought up to me Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan lost his father tragically. He took a break from the game, came back, and they won the finals that year on Father's Day with the Chicago Bulls, obviously. And he was very emotional. weighed on him heavily, but he didn't show it. And then the moment where, they finally win the finals, it's the end of the season, and Jordan just breaks down, and he's just, you know, he's just he's just letting it all out. That's what I saw today from Khabib, a guy that put on a real poker face for a person that, Khabib's father was not just his father. The relationship was like fivefold. He was his father. He was his number one fan. He was his coach. He was his mentor. And most importantly, he was the first guy to truly believe in him. And we've all had somebody like that in our lives, whether it's, my dad or my grandfather. Those are the two people that I have that have believed in me. And when I have moments where I'm like, man, I really need to, do this right. I got to make this happen. I got to do this. I got to do that. To know that you still have their support, that is really the one thing that keeps you going. And to lose that, especially in a competitive way, where, when I was playing even baseball or football, I was trying to compete to impress my dad, who was my coach. I was trying to compete to impress my grandfather, who was a coach that taught me a lot of the things that I know, that taught me a lot of the things that I talk about on this podcast. And, when you lose that person, it changes your whole, sense of who you are. What was it that they did to make you who you are? What is it that they did to, kind of be that quote unquote, figure? And rationalizing Khabib's reasons for his retirement, starting off with that, rationalizing Khabib's reasons. The reasons are substantial. They are extremely important. And to anyone that has lost someone, that it changes you. There is just no other way to put it than that. And for Khabib, something that he said in regards to his father that really, rang true to me was that this was his father's dream. It might not have been Khabib's dream to be the best fighter on planet Earth, to be undefeated. It was his father's path and his father's vision that he would help his son achieve heights as an athlete, as a competitor, as a fighter, as a mixed martial artist, that Khabib didn't believe he would even reach himself. And one of the few people that made him feel that he could and would was his father. So if it wasn't for him, would he be where he is today? And Khabib has hinted at that as well. And without that person around, it's extremely hard. I watched every which interview that Khabib took part in leading up to this fight, and he was extremely somber. He was extremely dialed in, focused, but you knew that there was something heavily weighing on his mind. And that something was obviously not the fact that his father had passed due to COVID-like, complications from COVID-19 and a heart condition. But the fact that he knew that he couldn't do this again. He couldn't do this. He couldn't walk out into that octagon without his dad. That was his fighting purpose. No win, no opponent, no amount of money outweighs that. And, I can only compare it to myself because, I see, I obviously not at Khabib's level at all, but I can honestly see what the tough moments were for Khabib and why. I can relate to that, not at this level, obviously, but I can relate to the fact that you compete in something not for yourself, but to, see the enjoyment that it put on my grandfather's face when I would get a double, when I would hit a double, when I would make a tackle, when I would make a nice catch in the outfield, or make a nice throw from third to first, or steal second. That was really what I remember about those moments. Not that I did those things, but that my grandpa was there to see it and enjoy it and appreciate it. That was what was worth it to me. And I think for Khabib, what made the run, what made the journey so worth it was the journey itself, showing that journey to his dad. And for his dad to not be here, what was the point to him anymore? The mission was accomplished. And beyond that, Khabib is not a selfish guy. He didn't fight for his own reasons. He fought to inspire, and he fought to really make his dad proud. And I think it's safe to say that he did today. He did today. He made a lot of people proud. He made the sport of MMA proud. He made Dana White proud. He made all those guys proud that, thought, hey, this guy has the opportunity to do something really special. He could go 30-0. And rather than going 30-0, he said, no, I'm done. I don't need it anymore. I don't want it anymore. And I appreciate that, to be honest, to know when it's done, to know when you have reached your pinnacle. And as far as Khabib's retirement goes, I mean, we take all the stuff with his dad out of the equation and we say to ourselves, what did this guy truly accomplish? He truly accomplished something that in the sport of mixed martial arts, it is unprecedented for a fighter to retire undefeated, 29-0, unblemished, beating guys like Conor McGregor, beating guys like Dustin Poirier, beating guys like Justin Gaethje, beating guys, that they all knew how they were going to, or what they all knew what they were going to expect from Khabib, and they couldn't stop it. That is the measure of true dominance in this fight. And in this fight and in many other fights. And I think that when I look at Khabib and I look at, some of the all-time greats, most of which I've seen from start to finish of their careers, Khabib being one of them as well. I've been in this racket as far as covering the sport for the last 5-6 years. But as a fan, in terms of my fandom, that goes back to when I was 5-6 years old. My dad would get the VHS tapes and we'd watch them. And it wasn't even on pay-per-view. It wasn't even on pay-per-view yet. It wasn't even legal on pay-per-view. Something else that's on pay-per-view, and it's a lot more graphic than the UFC. I won't mention it, but you guys can fill in the blanks. It just goes to show you how far the sport has come in the last 25 years. So when I look at Khabib and I look at some of the other great fighters, George St. Pierre is one that comes to mind. Demetrius Johnson is one that comes to mind. Anderson Silva, John Jones. I mean, you can rank them however you want. It's the same analogy that I use for Brady over Peyton Manning, or Brady over Montana, or Peyton Manning over Montana. I'm going to go off of the guys that I actually saw. And the best part about mixed martial arts for me is that I actually got to see pretty much all of these guys from the start of their careers to the end of their careers. Being that this sport has kind of grown within my lifetime. That is what is so fascinating about this. By the time I'm old and 70, 80, hopefully I live that long, I'll have seen all of these guys. I'll have known all of these guys from way, way back. George St. Pierre. I remember back in my day, George St. Pierre, Chuck Liddell. I'll be that old guy talking about these guys. And that's what is really cool about this sport. And that's really what is cool about, boxing for my dad and for my uncles or friends' dads or whatever, that it has that historic feeling to it, that within history, these guys are cemented forever. And Khabib is one of those guys. He is cemented forever. He is listed, in my opinion, in my top 5, right in that top 5. One of these days, I will put out like an updated ranking of the GOATs and who I believe are the best to ever do it. But I'll let you guys know as a sneak peek, Khabib is a top 5 all-time great in this sport. There are few fighters that can retire undefeated, but to win the fights the way he did for as long as he did, there was moments where Khabib was given all the props and all the credit in the world as one of the great fighters that just can't stay healthy. He couldn't stay healthy. He couldn't stop getting hurt. He trained so hard that his body just couldn't handle it. And then he started to train smarter, work harder, not work harder, but work smarter, not harder. And what a reward he reaped from that whole process. What a reward. Um, One of the best careers that you could count on one hand, maybe on four fingers, three fingers, the amount of MMA fighters that were able to retire coming off of their best performance that they have ever had. I don't know if I've ever seen that, to be honest. Even with GSP's retirement, he took the 4-year break. A lot of people thought that the Bisping fight was a challenge for him due to the fact that he was moving up to middleweight. He'd never competed at middleweight before. But for a fighter as dominant as Khabib to win a fight like this, as impressive a performance as he's ever put on, I am a little bit glum about this tonight because I think Khabib is such a special fighter, and he created a lot of special moments in the sport's history these last few years. So I think of, to me, the fights that came and went, right? The fights that could have happened, that won't happen, due to the fact that I do think that in terms of Khabib's retirement, I want to touch back on that. In terms of Khabib's retirement, I will say that this is a legit retirement. I think he is done. I think this is it. When, he says that his father passed and it's weighing on him heavily, he doesn't want to go through that again. In terms of fighting without his dad, he told his mother that he would never fight without his dad again. That is a real thing. And it is such a, it is such a, I don't know. I can't even come up with the right word for it. It was such a beautiful moment, really, to see, him say to himself, my family is more important than me. My family is more important than my career. Name a professional athlete that has ever openly said that. Name a professional athlete that has openly said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go do what's best for my family. That was, wow. It was amazing. It was a true moment that, a lot of kids can look up to this man. A lot of kids that are just starting jiu-jitsu, just starting wrestling, just starting boxing, and maybe even training in mixed martial arts as a whole can look up to Khabib and say, wow, that guy was a shining light. He was an example to look up to. So the fights that came and went for me, the fights that I would really have liked to have seen, I am happy for Khabib. I think the retirement was right. I think the reasons behind it, as I said, were beautiful reasons, to be honest, under trying circumstances. And it's tragic that, Khabib's going through what he's going through right now and has gone through what he's gone through these last, 4 or 5 months. But in terms of, the fights and entertainment, the Khabib Conor rematch would have been a great one. Ultimately, I do see Khabib winning that rematch. I think Conor is for Conor, the worst matchup for Conor is Khabib. That's fact. And, as great as a fight that would have been, as great a fight as it would have been to see the build up, and that would have been one of the highest purchase pay-per-views. It is the highest purchase pay-per-view in UFC history. The rematch would have been even bigger. Money isn't the motive for Khabib either, due to the fact that he made the big money against Conor in the first fight. Khabib versus Tony. I mean, if you want to talk about a fight that just is the lost fight, right? The fight that we thought we were going to get 4 or 5 times over, that was the fight, Khabib versus Tony. The fact that fight didn't happen is just criminal. It's devastating to a guy like me who wants to see these dream matchups happen. These dream matchups between, if Khabib took Tony down, how would that shake out? Because Tony's really funky off of his back. He can get submissions. He can make things happen. That's what made that fight so entertaining. And knowing that it's never going to happen, legitimately, emphatically, it is done. It is dead. Khabib is moving forward, and Tony is on the outside looking in, coming off of that loss to Justin Gaethje. But really, for me, the one fight that I was thinking about the entire night, if Khabib made short work of Justin Gaethje, obviously if he didn't retire, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus George St. Pierre. That's the biggest fight in UFC history that never was and maybe never will be. And, I say never in combat sports because I thought that there was 0.000% chance that Floyd Mayweather would ever get in a boxing ring with Conor McGregor and vice versa. And that happened. So, that has always been my caveat. Never say never, because Floyd Mayweather and Conor did fight one another. But with Khabib and George, it's like the GOAT of yesteryear versus the GOAT of today. And when have we ever had a fight like that in mixed martial arts history? I can't remember a fight like that. Israel Adesanya, Anderson Silva is very similar, in terms of styles and how styles make fights. But I'd say maybe Matt Hughes versus Royce Gracie. It has that type of feel to it in terms of, the pioneer, the guy that paved the way, and then the guy that really brought his own style. And, George, such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. In my opinion, he's the greatest ever. You guys know that. But when I look at Khabib, it's just a different type of grappling, a different type of pressure, a different type of initiating the takedown. I mean, the Justin Gaethje fight in particular, Khabib, most wrestlers, and I can attest to this as a former wrestler, most wrestlers, when you're shooting for a single leg takedown, you're shooting for a single leg takedown. It is extremely hard, almost, I don't want to say impossible because it's obviously done, but the elite of the elite can only shoot for a single leg takedown and transition to a double leg takedown as if that was the original takedown that they were shooting for. Khabib did that today. He shot for a single on Justin Gaethje. It wasn't there. He then was able to pick up the other leg and drive and get a double leg takedown. And my jaw dropped to the floor. Like, for a wrestler, former wrestler, or anyone that has wrestled in their life, to see a fighter be able to do that, it's mind-blowing. I mean, this guy is a special human being in terms of what his body can do. Most wrestlers, even at the highest levels of NCAA wrestling, Olympic wrestling, they can't do that in that fashion. And if you guys watch the fight, you'll know the exact moment I'm talking about. It looked as if Khabib dove after Justin Gaethje's legs, and his legs were off the screen. I mean, they disappeared. Khabib just engulfed his legs and pushed him against the fence. And that is what makes this guy so special. So wondering how the Khabib GSP fight would have turned out, I did watch George St. Pierre's interview with Ariel Helwani, and I came away thinking, man, that's the fight that we really should have been able to see at some point. But at the same time, these guys are two extremely respectable champions, icons, legends in the sport. And maybe it's better that they didn't fight. Both of these guys have such loyal fan bases that love and adore these guys, that it's almost for the better that it didn't, because you would hate to see one of these guys lose. You would. I would hate to see one of these guys lose. I like both guys that much. I respect both guys that much that I would hate to see one of those guys lose. But all in all, a really great performance from Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I'll always say, if this is the end for Khabib Nurmagomedov, because in the fight game, guys retire and then they come back. You never know. It could be the end. It could be the beginning to something new. But if this is the end for Khabib, what a career. Literally ending this career on a perfect note, ending this career in a form and fashion that is truly unprecedented, and battling adversity in the toughest times of his life, battling adversity throughout his pro MMA career. Those of you that know the journey of Khabib know that his adventure, his journey was no cakewalk. He did everything the hard way. He did everything the right way. And to get this done and to wrap up a career, you just say he made it hard for himself within his fights. He chose the path that nobody chooses. He chose the path of grinding out your opponent and trying to impose your will on your opponent, and he did it successfully 29 out of 29 times. ranked among the top 5 greatest UFC mixed martial artists to ever do it, and rightfully so. Khabib, it was a pleasure watching your career. You were a real one, and I truly believe that this sport will never see another. There will never be another guy like Khabib. There will never be another career like Khabib. There will never be another fighter that chooses that path, the path of dominating your opponent via wrestling. Wrestling is the toughest sport on the face of the earth, and Khabib chose it time and time again. Diamonds in the rough. That's what Khabib was. He was one of the diamonds in the rough. Joe Silva found this Dagestani wrestler, knew that he was special, but I don't think he knew how special he truly was. I don't think any of us did. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was my UFC 254 post-fight reaction show. Khabib Nurmagomedov rides off into the sunset with the UFC lightweight title, defending it 3 times, but finishing his career with an unblemished 29-0 record, one of the greatest careers that the sport of mixed martial arts has ever seen. Onward and upward. Be diving into what is next for the UFC lightweight division tomorrow. Now that we have a vacant UFC 155-pound lightweight belt, who will fight for the vacant belt? Maybe Conor McGregor, maybe Dustin Poirier. Maybe that fight will be an interim, or not interim, will be for the vacated UFC lightweight championship. I got some ideas. To top it all off, too, the big caveat after the fight is the fact that Khabib literally fought with a broken foot. I noticed his foot was a little bit taped up during the locker room walkthrough, and I'm like, that's interesting. That's really interesting. But are we really shocked? Are we really shocked that Khabib was able to pull that off? I'm not. One of the best to ever do it. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.